Chapter 85. Alone, having supposedly buried over 7 nobles, an accusation he hadn't even heard before, wore a bewildered expression for only a moment. Unsure how to clear up the misunderstanding, he eventually decided not to respond at all. While misunderstandings about who killed whom should be promptly resolved in ordinary human relationships, he was currently conversing with one of the key players in Asteria's dark schemes. "Is that the only reason you contacted me?" As Alone neither affirmed nor denied, the Duke of Alsha nodded. "Yes, I've reported everything to you." Having received a report about Kalfa before this conversation, Alone nodded in agreement. "Then, I'll see you at the upcoming coronation." Watching the Duke of Alsha bow, Alone let out a small sigh and thought, come to think of it, there's a coronation coming up. Recalling this, Alone began sorting through the pile of letters stacked in one corner of his office desk. Soon, he found one bearing the royal family's seal and a paper beneath it. It was from the royal secretary, containing various trivial formalities, but essentially stated that Count Palacio was away for an extended period, so he had only left the letter behind. "The coronation is in 4 months, right?" "For months." Alone considered this period, which could be seen as either long or short, and then remembered something else. In about 4 months, it will be just under a year before the original story begins. The approaching timeline, which he had experienced countless times in the game, was a strange mix of emotions for Alone, but only for a moment. By then, there will be a whole truckload of enemies to deal with. He recalled the enemies that would emerge as the original storyline began. While the proxy was dealt with, the ghost castle hasn't been handled yet. Remembering the situation he had checked before going to the colony, Alone let out a small sigh and leaned back in his chair. There was more to deal with than he initially thought. "I have to take care of the current troublemakers, as well as the hidden outer gods." In fact, handling the current troublemakers was not that difficult. In Psychedelia, apart from the outer gods or the 5 great sins, the entities that could truly plunge the entire United Kingdom into chaos and conflict only became active when the original story started. Of course, Alone's goal was to lead a leisurely life by the time such chaos descended upon the United Kingdom. To that end, he had supported Eliban, the main protagonist of the original story. When the original story begins, I'll need to support him once again. Thinking about Eliban, who would secure his peaceful future, Alone then shifted his focus back to the outer gods, letting out another sigh. Unlike the future entities, the outer gods were Alone's responsibility to handle. "The problem is that I don't know where this one is located. Even finding it will be a challenge." Alone's victories against the outer gods so far were only possible because they had not yet fully materialized in the world. It wasn't just that, his wins were also thanks to knowing certain characteristics, or rather, weaknesses, of the outer gods. If he were to face a hidden outer god, it would likely be a completely different kind of battle. Well, as long as I can find out who the outer god is, I can prepare accordingly. But the real problem is its complete manifestation. If the outer god was indeed hiding on the continent, there was a high likelihood that it was already fully manifested. After descending to the ground, an outer god becomes fully established as a sage-like entity in a few months. A fully manifested outer god would undoubtedly be much stronger than those Alone had faced before. In other words, even if Alone managed to locate an outer god now, his chances of winning would be slim. No, not just slim, 0. While Alone's magic was powerful enough to affect an outer god, it still fell short of confronting a fully manifested one. There were clear limitations on how many times he could use magic, and the time it took to cast spells was also significantly long. The only advantage was that once cast, his magic worked effectively against enemies. "I need to prepare. I should start gathering information on the hidden outer god." Realizing the need to prepare for the battle with the outer god, Alone looked at the letter from the royal family. Despite having for months, the time felt surprisingly short. As Alone sorted out his tasks along with the letter from the royal family, he let out a quiet sigh. It's been over 3 weeks since Count Palacio left, yet Penia Chrisin and Felin Chrisin were still traveling alongside Raiden. Of course, Penia's reason for continuing to accompany Raiden was simply for convenience. Most of what she needed to investigate in Raxas involved the illegal distribution of materials or finished products from the Magic Tower. And since Alone had made a request before he left, Raiden treated Penia and Felin quite well. Thanks to this, Penia was able to accomplish her tasks faster than planned, with the help of the pirates. Today, she found herself within the royal castle of Raxas, accompanied by Raiden. However, their purposes and times of arrival at the castle were different, and Penia, who didn't particularly care about public opinion, had no intention of making it known that she was traveling with the Pirate King. Therefore, Raiden was present as an envoy, aiming to adjust the future relationship between Raxus and the Pirate King, who had unified the 7 archipelagos. Penia, on the other hand, was there to confront the kingdom about the secret leak of certain illegally distributed magical items. Having completed her tasks, Penia was approached by someone familiar. "It's been a while, hasn't it, Penia? Last time I saw you was during the envoy visit, about 4 years ago." "Wow, has it really been that long?" "Yeah, I guess so." Penia was meeting Serena Raxasia, the princess of Raxus. Serena's relationship with Penia was quite close, largely because of the current Blue Tower master, Selene. As a former disciple of Selene, Penia had trained in magic alongside Serena, who also came to the Blue Tower due to her talent in magic. Though Serena eventually returned to Raxus after realizing her limitations, the two had formed a strong bond during their younger years. "So, how's your progress in magic lately?" I think I'm about to reach the next level." "Wow, really? That's amazing. Isn't it?" Despite being a princess and a vice master of the tower, Serena and Penia maintained a relaxed, friendly conversation, as if they were old friends. After chatting for some time, Serena suddenly remembered something unusual. "Oh, by the way, I heard some strange news." "Strange news?" "Yeah, I heard you're being kept by a man." "What? Me?" Serena nodded at Penia's baffled expression. "Yeah, who was it again?" "Oh, Count Palacio? I think it was a noble like that." "Is it true?" "What? Kept by someone?" "Absolutely not." Serena teased Penia, grinning mischievously. "Come on, the rumors everywhere. They say the always fiery you suddenly turns demure in front of Count Palacio." Penia frowned, trying to come up with a rebuttal but fell silent. As she thought about it, Serena's statement wasn't entirely incorrect. Still, she didn't want to concede so easily. "No, really, it's not like that." Seeing Penia's weak denial, Serena's eyes lit up as if she had found something amusing. "You actually like him, don't you?" "What? Who?" "Count Palacio, of course." Penia gave Serena an exasperated look as Serena continued with her playful tone. "No, I don't." "Really?" Penia, trying to maintain her composure, struggled to respond clearly. "Absolutely not, even if the sky falls, that won't happen." As Penia recalled Felin's previous nonsense, Serena watched her with a curious expression. "Really? Really? I have no idea why everyone keeps misunderstanding this. I honestly don't like him." Tilda. "It's true. Who could even like such a stoic person? All he does is put on a stern face and... I mean, Palacio is quite an impressive person. He's also very impressive and, well, impressive. Isn't that 3 times already?" Penia, trying hard to keep the conversation going, said, "You know, when you see his magic, there's just something captivating about it. Count Palacio's magic is very unique." "Then you like him, right?" "That's absolutely possible, maybe." Serena grinned as Penia bowed her head and spoke with a hint of resignation. "So you like him, huh?" "Yeah. I guess so." With her head lowered, Penia glanced sideways, catching sight of Raiden. Nodding with a satisfied expression, Raiden disappeared from view outside the window. Sigh. Penia let out a sigh of relief, but Serena, observing her friend's reaction, thought to herself, "It seems like her personality makes it hard for her to make a move." Feeling a sudden burst of goodwill towards her dear friend, Serena decided to lend a helping hand. Penia was met with an unexpected gesture of goodwill. Tilda. Having made her decision, Serena let out a faint smile, an insidious smile, completely unaware of her own misconception. For months later, after a busy schedule of gathering information to uncover the identity of the outer god, increasing his mana core capacity, and researching magic, Alone finally boarded a carriage headed for the capital, Tyria, just in time for the coronation. "Count. What is it? Did you hear about this? What is it this time? There's a rumor going around about you." "A rumor about me?" "Yes." From Evan, Alone heard about a rather strange rumor. "It seems there's a rumor that Penia Crissin is in love with Count Palacio." "What? Penia Crissin? The vice master of the Blue Tower?" What a ridiculous, strange rumor. Chapter 86. Is that really a rumor going around? Yes. There was a meeting of the United Kingdoms not long ago, right? Was there? Honestly, it seems like the Count really has no interest in what's going on around him. That's true. Evan quickly responded to Alone's nod. Anyway, it seems that kind of story came up there. There's talk that Penia Chrisin and Count Palacio might end up together. Was there? Was Penia Chrisin present there? Of course not. The event was just for the royals to build rapport and maintain the alliance of the United Kingdoms. Then why did such a rumor start? I don't know. I only heard it secondhand. When Evan shrugged his shoulders, Alone looked genuinely puzzled. It was understandable, as there wasn't any plausible basis for such rumors to arise between Penia and Alone. In fact, thinking back to Penia's behavior not long ago, it was baffling that such a rumor had even started. What is this? Alone, still looking perplexed, soon decided to ignore the rumors. Gossip tended to get distorted as it spread, especially among the nobility, and he figured it would naturally disappear over time. Most baseless rumors that Alone had encountered so far had faded away quickly. It's just a rumor that doesn't require much attention. And so, Alone dismissed it lightly, at least until a few days later, right before arriving in Tyria. At the simple banquet held for the nobles attending the title bestowal ceremony. Congratulations, Count! For what, exactly? I heard a rumor that you and Penia Chrisin are in a certain kind of relationship. Alone found himself internally repeating question marks. He had heard this same rumor 5 times now, despite having only just arrived at the venue. Thank you for the congratulations, but unfortunately, that's just a false rumor. After dismissing the noble's comment, Alone retreated to one corner of the banquet hall to enjoy an egg tart. Soon, Duke Alsha appeared before him. It's been a while, Count. Alone nodded at her smiling, bowing gesture, but it was only brief. It has been a while. Is there any truth to that rumor, by any chance? What rumor are you referring to? The one I recently heard about you having a certain relationship with Penia Chrisin, the master of the Blue Tower. It was the 6th time now. Baseless rumors might fade away quickly, but before they did, they certainly blazed brightly. Sighing, Alone responded, I've already said it multiple times, but that rumor is nonsense. Is that so? Yes. It's not even remotely true. I thought it was real. Why? Well, marrying the master of the Blue Tower would have a very positive impact on your household and our faction, you see. For example. As Alsha began to enumerate the advantages of marrying Penia Chrisin, Alone felt an increasing sense of weariness. Her thorough analysis of all the potential benefits and drawbacks, from major to minor, reminded him that she was indeed one of Asteria's 3 major strategists. Not that anything has really changed now. Just as Alone was having these thoughts. Given all these positives, I figured you would seriously consider marriage, Count. Am I wrong? Besides, I assumed you were the one who spread the rumor. Me. Rumors can be quite powerful, you know. When spread this way, even if the other party dislikes it, they might be compelled to consider it due to the collective interests of the factions involved. Alsha's casual comment, which turned him into a scheming manipulator, prompted Alone to respond. Even I wouldn't go that far. Really? Seeing Alsha's genuinely surprised expression, Alone couldn't help but wonder how he was perceived by these people. As he contemplated this, Alsha, who was deep in thought, suddenly said, Maybe you're a bit romantic when it comes to matters like this, Count. With that comment and a soft smile, she departed after exchanging a few more words. By the end of that day, Alone had received congratulations 9 times. It wasn't as easy as I thought. The next day, the title bestowal ceremony began. In front of the gathered nobles, the 8th monarch Cretinia, Scion, declared that Count Palacio had been promoted to the rank of Marquis. The title bestowal ceremony, in reality, ended very quickly. However, despite the ceremony being over, Alone was still technically a count. The reason was simple: in order to officially use the title of Marquis, he had to receive a blessing from the Archbishop of the Holy Kingdom of Rosario. With this in mind, Alone began preparing to head to Rosario immediately after the ceremony. Well then, have a safe trip. Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty. Scion, who was watching Alone bow his head in response to her well wishes, suddenly approached him with a thoughtful expression. Then, just as she had done before, she gently lifted the corners of his mouth with her index finger. "Didn't I say you look better when you smile?" "I apologize, Your Majesty," Alone replied, bowing his head again. "Well, that's enough. Once you complete the blessing, come back. Let's have a proper talk face to face." With a faint smile, Cyan waved her hand and turned away. Alone, who had been left staring blankly at Cyan's unexpected behavior, began preparing for his journey to the Holy Kingdom. The journey from Asteria to Rosario took about 2 to 3 weeks, a relatively long trip. However, it was more comfortable than his previous trip to Raxas, as there were more villages and territories along the way where he could rest. Because of this, Alone enjoyed a relatively smoother journey compared to before. About a week into the trip to Rosario, Alone was taking a break at an inn in the village of Nenda. "Should I call you Marquis now, instead of Count?" "It's hard to get used to," Evan remarked. "I'm still not a Marquis yet, so just call me Count." "All right then, Count. I found one of the pieces of information you asked me to look into." "Here?" Alone asked, surprised. "Yes, there's an information broker in this village as well. So, I stopped by." "So, what's the information?" Alone inquired. "It's nothing major, but it seems that abyss stones and abyssal entities have been appearing more frequently in the black market recently." "Does that mean they are being widely distributed?" "No, it doesn't seem to be in large quantities, but they've been showing up often," Evan replied. Alone thought deeply, realizing this was not good news. The spread of abyss stones and abyssal entities was never a positive sign. Abyssal entities granted divine powers to the strong, making them even stronger, and their emergence in the underworld significantly increased the likelihood of the world descending into chaos. Moreover, the original text only mentioned that abyssal entities were being distributed somewhere, without specifying the exact distribution channels. This meant Alone couldn't use his knowledge to stop their spread. "Have you found the source of the distribution?" Alone asked, just in case. Unfortunately, Evan shook his head. "No, I couldn't find the source, but I did learn where most of it has been going." "Where is it?" "The Holy Kingdom," Evan answered. "The Holy Kingdom?" Alone's expression became puzzled. The Holy Kingdom seemed like the least likely place to be involved with abyssal entities. Of course, the Holy Kingdom isn't exactly free from corruption, but I didn't think they would go as far as dealing with abyssal entities, Alone thought, tilting his head. "I should probably ask Yusha about this too. Now I'll have 2 requests for her. Should I get a gift for her as well?" Alone considered. He was already planning to ask Yusha for a favor once he reached the Holy Kingdom. "I should try to stop somewhere along the way and get at least one gift," he decided. A little while later. "It's about time for dinner. Let's go down and eat." "All right," Evan agreed. As they descended to the first floor of the inn to have dinner, Alone noticed that the previously empty room was now filled with boisterous noise, almost to the point of hurting his ears. "Are those mercenaries?" Alone asked. "It seems so," Evan replied. "This inn has surprisingly good soundproofing." "I was surprised too," Evan added. Alone then moved toward an empty table in the corner of the inn. Despite the noise, he still needed to eat. However, just as Alone was about to sit down. "Hold up." "Who?" A mercenary suddenly occupied the seat, leaving Alone bewildered. "What are you looking at?" "This is my seat," the mercenary, who had been mingling with his comrades moments earlier, snapped at Alone. Both Alone and Evan wore incredulous expressions. Even for a mercenary unfamiliar with the ways of the world, it seemed absurd for someone to provoke a clearly noble-looking individual. "Are you telling me to sit somewhere else?" "Who?" He caught a whiff of the mercenary's overpowering stench of alcohol and quickly realized that his intoxicated state had rendered him almost mindless. He pondered how to handle the situation. Alone suddenly noticed that the surroundings had grown quiet and looked around. The other mercenaries were still there, but the raucous chatter had stopped. They were now staring at Alone and the drunken mercenary, their faces frozen in shock and their mouths clamped shut. Just as Alone was wondering what had caused the shift. "Didn't you hear me? Just leave." Before the troublesome mercenary could finish, someone appeared behind him. Crash! A bottle shattered on his head. With a thud, the mercenary collapsed to the ground, shivering uncontrollably. Alone, startled by how quickly things had escalated, saw a female beastkin standing there. She was holding the broken bottle and bowing her head deeply. "My apologies, Count Palacio. Upon seeing her, Alone quickly recognized who she was. Mayan. I'm truly sorry. It was Mayan, the guild master of the Ancient Trackers Guild, one of the 5 major guilds in Lartania. She kept her head bowed. At the Blue Moon's regular meeting. Typically, only the 5 executive members of the Blue Moon participated in these meetings, but this time, Haydn was granted an exception due to his recent discovery of information about the faction that opposed the Great Moon. While the meeting was primarily for him to report this information, Haydn couldn't help but feel a bit excited. Deep down, he had a sense of respect for the Great Moon and the other moons, beings with fundamentally different strengths from his own. With anticipation, Haydn entered the meeting room. I'm getting married. No way. I'm getting married. No way. I'm getting married. No way. I've said this before, but this is too unfair. It's about time you let us send letters, too. I think that's fair enough. Looking up at the moon like this reminds me of those days. It's been years, but the memory is still vivid. The way the Great Moon dealt with the outer god was truly impressive. Oh, by the way, Haydn, have you heard about it? If not, let me explain in detail. Haydn could only feel dizzy amidst the chaos. Chapter 87. Haydn was well aware that the moons, including Yusha Bloodia, revered and worshipped the Great Moon. After all, the motto of the Blue Moon had always been for the Great Moon. But still. So, I'm telling you not to speak of marriage if you don't fully understand it. I do understand. I can make the Great Moon happy. That's not for you to decide. Yes, it is. No, it's not. To this extent. I've been objecting consistently from the beginning, but regarding the part about sending letters individually. As I've said, since it might confuse the Great Moon, I suggested gathering them myself. Isn't it equally reasonable for me to be the one gathering them? There's no need to change it now, is there? But I would like to change it. So to send the letters, times. He hadn't expected them to be this fanatical, honestly. Now, listen. Back then, the Great Moon held his ground firmly even in front of the outer god. The sun averted its gaze under their piercing eyes, sinking into twilight, and the ash-grey world returned to a pristine white snowfield. That wasn't the end, their strike was truly awe-inspiring. It had already been 20 minutes, and even members other than Yusha appeared unsettled by Deus' prolonged now, let's commence the praise of the Great Moon. Of course, Haydn, too, revered and worshipped the Great Moon, so he didn't find this strange. It was just a bit different from the image he had of the moons, which was mildly unsettling. Honestly, his enthusiasm was starting to wane a little. Would you all mind stopping now? We still have matters to report, don't we? As Haydn quietly sighed, a voice interrupted. Unlike the others who were still chattering, Raiden stood there with a serene, faint smile. That expression reminded Haydn of the reverence he used to feel when he looked at the other moons. Feeling a peculiar sense of relief, he cleared his throat and spoke, looking at the now silent moons. Then, let's begin the report. Today, his report essentially centered on one topic, the faction seeking to undermine the Great Moon. To get straight to the point, we haven't yet identified any organization trying to harm the Great Moon. Why not? Yusha, with a serious expression, asked as the Crimson Moon. It appears they're highly reluctant to reveal their identities. Even when tracking connections to a point of contact, most are just intermediaries. So, even if someone identifies as a contact, they're not aware of the organization. That's correct. After clearing his throat, he continued. There was one instance where we managed to trace a contact higher up, but even that connection was only a front. They're taking extreme measures to hide their identities. At Rhine's mutter, Haydn nodded. Yes. However, we have managed to gather some information that might help us identify them. Information. Though minor, we have identified around 8 organizations that the higher group aiming to harm the Great Moon uses as intermediaries. Based on these organizations, we can begin. How did you find them? It seems orders were given to other organizations to slander the Great Moon. While investigating this matter, we managed to compile a list. The names of the organizations include Dark Melodies. At this, Deus began listing each organization one by one. Then we should just kill them. Excuse me. Haydn was momentarily stunned by Raiden's blunt statement, especially since Raiden had been one of the few appearing reasonable until now. Well, killing them might be correct, but shouldn't we focus on uncovering the higher ranks first? Didn't you just say they're plotting against the Great Moon? Yes, but... Then we should kill them. Raiden's expression was as if to say, isn't it obvious that 1 + 1 = 2? Haydn, dumbfounded for a moment, replied. As the White Moon says, we do need to eliminate them. But isn't gathering information about the upper organization just as important? Regardless, they're targeting the Great Moon, right? That's also true. Then killing them is the right course of action. Yes, killing them is the right course. As Haydn watched Raiden nodding with determination, he realized something anew. Though Raiden had stayed quiet earlier, it was clear now that he wasn't exactly the kind of person Haydn had initially thought he was. And, furthermore, this won't do. ? I'll be back shortly. Dark Melodies is connected to Raksas, isn't it? Wait, White Moon. What? Dark Melodies has ties with the Raksas royal family, so if you act impulsively, it might bring you some trouble. But before Haydn could finish, I heard that they're plotting against our leader. Does that really matter? ? Raiden's previous smile faded into a chillingly blank expression. As he turned, he grabbed a spear in the corner and leaped out the window, leaving Haydn stunned, mouth agape. Soon after, a decision was reached to leave a few organizations to deal with the entities opposing the Great Moon, as Raiden had already taken matters into his own hands. With Raiden gone, the meeting continued. My final report is about a peculiar rumor currently surrounding the Great Moon. What kind of rumor? There's talk that the Great Moon is romantically involved with the Vice Lord of the Blue Tower. It's not a major rumor, but since it involves the Great Moon, I thought I should report it. At Haydn's words, Yusha, who had previously been leading the meeting with calm, nodded before speaking. Seems like complete nonsense. I agree. There's no way my master would break a promise. Sealrang nodded, agreeing with her statement. I think so too. Yes, since it's obviously baseless, let's not worry about it. Not at all. Though Haydn nodded in agreement, Yusha's smile never wavered. Understood. Even if, hypothetically, the rumor turned out to be true, I would still make it disappear. Excuse me. Of course, there's no chance of such a thing happening. But if by any stretch of the imagination it did, I'd make sure the rumor ceased to exist, so there's no need to worry. She spoke at a rapid pace, and the pen in her hand had crumpled and shattered in her grip. Yes, understood. Haydn thought to himself, I'd better save the report on that man until tomorrow. And the following day, he heard news that Dark Melodies had been obliterated overnight, prompting him to rethink the fanaticism of the moons. Meanwhile, after learning that the mercenary group that caused trouble yesterday was the Ancient Trackers Guild, operating out of Lartania with its leader Mayan, Alone was now moving together with the Ancient Trackers Guild at the inn in Nenda. The reason was that the Ancient Trackers Guild's destination was the same as Alone's, the Holy Kingdom of Rosario. An extermination request. Though Alone hadn't discussed with Mayan what kind of request they had received from the kingdom or if there were any restrictive conditions, remembering what she mentioned yesterday, Alone wondered, is something happening in Rosario? The thought came to him unconsciously. Some time later, Alone stopped the carriage for a lunch break. Count, or should I call you your lordship? Just call me whatever's comfortable. All right, then I'll call you Count, and, hey! Get over here, quick! Soon, Alone noticed a mercenary approaching with Mayan. The man, a head taller than Mayan, immediately fell to the ground in front of Alone. I'm deeply sorry. I committed a grave offense. Thud. He slammed his head to the ground, blood starting to pool around his head. Forget about it, just consider it a minor incident, Alone replied, a bit taken aback but shaking his head lightly. At his response, the man, who'd looked as if he was on the brink of death, broke into a bright smile, as if given a new lease on life. Thank you. Truly, thank you. Really, thank you so much. He bowed repeatedly, as if he owed Alone his life, before returning to the other mercenaries. That guy's lucky, huh? Wow, he survived that. Incredible. Though they spoke in hushed tones, their words reached Alone's ears, amplified by his magic-enhanced hearing, leaving him with mixed feelings. What do they think of me, he thought, a bit incredulously. Seeing Alone's bemused expression, Mayan sighed in relief. I'm glad. I honestly thought the Count wouldn't forgive him. He's a recent recruit, so I felt a bit sorry for him. I didn't think I had that kind of image. But last time, didn't someone say the wrong thing and end up an ice statue? Alone paused, recalling that he had only done so to assert himself. Still, he opened his mouth to clarify. That was just circumstantial. I'm not that ruthless. Based on the rumors, I thought you'd be different. Rumors? Mayan nodded. There's talk that you eliminate those you dislike without hesitation, leaving no trace behind. Hearing this, Alone couldn't help but feel a bit indignant as he remembered how he'd kept cordial with even troublesome nobles and others he didn't particularly like. But knowing his appeal would likely go unheard, he only sighed softly. Are you sure you should talk about this in front of me? Well, nobles involved in the underworld usually enjoy these kinds of stories, right? It's a place where rumors matter, after all. With Mayan's relaxed response, Alone felt oddly bitter, wondering why such strange rumors seemed to grow over time. 2 weeks passed quickly. Aside from a minor disturbance at the village inn, Alone found his journey to Rosario with the Ancient Trackers Guild quite comfortable, thanks to Mayan's occasional company, which kept him from boredom. Or rather, Mayan had often sought him out herself, even without him asking. In any case, Alone found the journey to Rosario rather pleasant. Mayan felt similarly, as traveling with Alone had helped them grow closer over the past 2 weeks. Indeed, Mayan was making considerable efforts to build a favorable connection with Count Palacio. Initially, she hadn't planned it, but meeting Alone on her journey to the Holy Kingdom after unexpectedly taking up this mission had given her a new idea. She had plenty of motivation to form a plan, as, by nature, she was drawn to strong men, and Alone's qualities were exceptional even by the standards of her feline clan. Thus, Mayan, having taken a strong liking to Count Palacio, frequently engaged him in various conversations, contemplating how to make something happen between them. In her view, she was even making progress. Of course, for Alone, it just felt like he'd found a friendly companion to chat with. Finally. We've arrived. Should I try to make a bit more of a move? Last time, it seemed he didn't like it when I came on too strong, so maybe I should act more like the humans. As the two, each with different thoughts, reached the capital of Rosario after their pleasant journey, they were greeted by an unexpected figure. You've arrived, sir. Yusha. Yes. I sent a letter, but I didn't expect you to come out and meet me. Oh, this is nothing difficult. Is that so? Before even reaching the city gates, Alone spotted Yusha waiting with the paladins. Mayan, watching from the side, couldn't help but stare in awe. Wow, she's really beautiful. Mayan found herself gazing at Yusha. Even dressed in black ceremonial attire, her striking beauty shone, and the piercing gaze of her crimson eyes seemed to draw Mayan's heart in. Count Palacio really is something. I'd heard, but I didn't think he had connections all the way up to a cardinal. Mayan marveled at Alone, surprised by his deep ties. Though she knew of his extensive connections, she had half doubted the full extent. But now, seeing Yusha here, Mayan's admiration grew. Perhaps I should be bolder in my approach. As she watched Alone, her desire to win him over intensified, and she began contemplating how to adjust her plan. Sir, let's move inside for now. From here, we'll provide the escort. Yusha instructed the knights to guard Alone's carriage, and as it began moving under the knights' protection, she turned to Mayan with a flawless smile. These people appear to be here on our behalf, is that correct? She asked as she approached Mayan. Yes, that's right. With Yusha's saint-like smile, Mayan instinctively nodded. Then Yusha leaned close to Mayan's ear, whispering with her face almost touching Mayan's. Sensing that Yusha had something secretive to convey, Mayan leaned in as well, curious. And then... Want to die? A chilling voice sent a shiver through Mayan's entire body. Chapter 88. Mayan's mind struggled to keep up with the situation. In the midst of the cheerful atmosphere, the whisper she heard was distinctly out of place. That's why Mayan, unable to respond, erased her smile and frowned a few seconds later. Of course, she knew she had to maintain her composure in this setting. Even if the words spoken were rude, the person was still one of the cardinals of the Holy Kingdom of Rosario. Despite hearing such unreasonable words, she knew that calming herself and responding with restraint had to come first. However, even as she knew this, her face involuntarily wrinkled in anger, a distinct fury of her people swelling within her. What did you just say? Her voice burst forth with irritation, but she stopped. No, it wasn't that she stopped speaking. The words just stopped. Her parted lips. her tongue that had moved to form words. Her frown. Everything simply stopped. The moment she realized this, Mayan suddenly sensed that something about this world had changed. The sunlight, which had been warm just a moment ago, was now tinged red. Her subordinates who had come with her for the mission were also bathed in red, and the paladins who had stood beside Yusha just a moment ago were frozen in place. As if time itself had come to a halt. What? Instinctively, Mayan tried to look around, but, regrettably, she couldn't move her body at all. All she could see was the eerie sight of lines, like trails of blood, tracing over the still bodies of her subordinates and the paladins. As she watched these lines form, as if marking boundaries, a sense of imminent danger washed over her. She tried, with all her might, to move her body. Listen closely. The voice from in front of her made her freeze, holding her breath as she looked straight ahead. And then, she saw it. In this crimson world, the only person retaining color, staring directly at her, the Cardinal of Rosario, Yusha Bludia. A chill of fear crept into Mayan's core, stemming not from losing control of her body. Nor was it the fear that Yusha Bludia would harm her. It was simply incomprehensible. Unfathomable. Yet, as if it were the natural course of things, fear began to seep into her mind, swiftly taking over and tormenting her. Without sparing any attention to Mayan's state, Yusha, the only one moving freely in this frozen world, approached her and locked eyes with her. In those red eyes, even more crimson than the world around them, and on that intensely impassive face, she could clearly sense rage. Looking straight at Mayan, Yusha placed a finger on Mayan's right hand. He is not someone you can toy with as you please. Her voice, a stark warning, echoed clearly. I hope you understand my words. The moment a faint smile appeared on her lips. Ah. Mayan realized the world had returned to normal. She stared blankly at the sky. The sky was blue. The forest had regained its original colors. Even Yusha, who had approached her before, was now smiling without the cold expression, looking serene, like a saint. The only thing unchanged from before was Yusha Bludia's intense red eyes peeking through her smiling gaze. For now, you seem to be a different guest, but I'll guide you inside the Holy Kingdom. With that, she turned and started walking toward the Holy Kingdom without any hesitation, and Mayan watched her retreating figure in a daze. She still hadn't fully grasped what had just happened, or rather, she couldn't distinguish whether it was a dream or reality. As Mayan's face contorted in confusion. Captain, is something wrong? Who? Why? She turned at the voice of her subordinate behind her, who asked with a slightly concerned expression. Well, it's just, you don't look well. You're sweating a lot. Oh. Only then did Mayan realize that her entire body was drenched in cold sweat. Clearly, she wasn't in a stable condition. Anne? Ah. Feeling a faint pain in her right hand, Mayan looked down at it and saw a small wound there, the shallow wound on the hand Yusha had touched in that red world. Upon noticing it, Mayan turned her gaze back to Yusha. As Yusha climbed into a carriage bound for the Holy Kingdom, she looked back with that same smile and piercing red eyes. Yusha's small, beckoning gesture before stepping into the carriage confirmed that the bizarre world she'd seen was indeed real. Thump 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 tilde. Mayan's entire body was filled with terror. Meanwhile, Alone, who had easily passed through the castle gates with the escort of the paladins, gazed upon the Holy Kingdom he had only seen in illustrations, thinking. It truly suits the name Holy Kingdom. The outer areas of the capital weren't much different from other territories. However, the inner city was impeccably maintained, with orderly streets and pristine white buildings. Eventually, Alone reached the massive cathedral beside the main building of Rosario, the great temple, where he soon encountered Yusha again. It's been a while, my lord. Indeed. How have you been? Of course, I've been well. Sometimes I get a little sad when your replies to my letters take a while, though. Seeing Yusha's light-hearted joke, Alone couldn't help but smile. Unlike his encounters with the other 5 sins, his frequent correspondence with Yusha made things feel much less awkward. They exchanged pleasantries for a while. So, the conferment ceremony will be in a few days. Yes. For the ceremony, the chief cardinal, who's currently in prayer, needs to attend. Tomorrow, you'll meet with the person in charge to review the ceremony's layout and instructions, and until then, you can rest. Alone nodded at Yusha's words as she smiled. Clearing his throat, he spoke. Yusha, if possible, I have a request. Would that be all right? Of course. What is your request? I was wondering if it might be possible to enter the spirit chamber. Could that be arranged? The spirit chamber. As the name suggests, it's a special room in Rosario accessible only to high-ranking individuals, where, supposedly, one could converse with the goddess Saronia whom Rosario venerates. However, naturally, simply entering the room doesn't mean one can speak to the goddess. Only those specifically chosen by Saronia or those with deep faith, usually of a bishop rank or higher, might faintly hear her voice. In fact, only the saint of Rosario is known to have truly heard the voice of the goddess. In other words, Alone would not be able to converse with the goddess even if he entered, but his reason for entering the spirit chamber wasn't to talk with her, it was to obtain a useful artifact. However, unless one was of cardinal rank, and especially without the permission of the current saint of Rosario, it was challenging even to set foot in that room. He asked with a mindset of it'd be nice if it works, but it's fine if it doesn't, yet. It's possible. If that's what you want, my lord. It won't be difficult. Is that so? Yes. Alone, surprised at the ease of her acceptance, spoke with a hint of confusion behind his expressionless face. Really? I mean, it sounds strange for me to question my own request, but I heard that only the saint's permission grants access to the spirit chamber. Isn't it difficult? It's fine. If you truly wish to go, I'll find a way. Yusha's unwavering assurance made Alone feel immensely grateful, though he didn't want to put her through too much trouble. If it proves difficult, let me know right away. No need to push yourself, he said, watching her with care. Don't worry. I wouldn't do anything excessive either, Yusha responded with a smile, seemingly aware of his concern. Seeing her smile, Alone felt content. He had been a bit worried after witnessing her clash with Sealrang in the colony, but after talking with her, he was certain of one thing: of all the 5 sins, she had been reformed the most. Her mindset is as upright as expected from someone devoted to faith. With that, Alone continued his conversation with Yusha, enjoying their discussion. It was the afternoon of the first day of his arrival in the Holy Kingdom. In the Kingdom of Ashtalon, inside Duke Comelin's office. Yes. The Dark Melodies Guild was annihilated overnight. Duke Comelin let out a deep sigh as he looked at the dark elf standing before him. Unlike the one who had reported last time, this person stood silently, head bowed. The Duke remained quiet for a moment before asking, "Who was responsible?" "We're mobilizing resources to investigate immediately, but we haven't yet identified the culprit. However, we do have a likely suspect." "Who?" "It seems it's someone connected to Count Palacio." "Why is that?" "We had already delivered the instructions you mentioned to the Dark Melodies Guild as well." At the Dark Elf's response, Duke Comelin pondered for a moment before speaking. "So, it's a similar situation to Pigul's case a few months ago." "Yes, it seems they retaliated." "Retaliation?" He muttered softly with a bitter laugh before falling silent again. After a prolonged pause, the Dark Elf cautiously asked, "What action should we take?" Duke Comelin resumed. "Last time, you said that the one responsible for handling Pigul was likely Deus Michaelian, right?" "Yes, he's one of the most likely candidates, though it's not confirmed." "And Deus Michaelian and Count Palacio share a benefactor relationship, correct?" "That's the rumor circulating, yes." "It's certainly not an ordinary connection." With that murmur, he decided, enough. Let's stop paying attention to this matter. "Are you sure about that?" "Yes, for now, the results we're expecting are more important than Count Palacio. We can deal with the Count after we've secured the results." The Dark Elf fell silent, then spoke again. "In fact, there's something else I need to inform you about." "What is it?" "Currently, Count Palacio is reportedly in the Holy Kingdom." "Count Palacio?" "Yes. I've heard that he went there for the conferment ceremony." The Dark Elf nodded, and Duke Comelin, wearing a strange expression, appeared almost pleased. "Then there's even less reason for concern." "Soon enough," he murmured, smiling. "The results of the Abyssal project will emerge there, and then we can handle Count Palacio as well." A foreboding smile crossed his face. The next day, Alone was able to meet the cardinal in charge of the conferment ceremony in a few days, hoping to familiarize himself with the event schedule. However, greetings, Count Palacio. I am Sergius. Pleased to meet you." Shivering, Alone watched as Sergius, one of the 8 cardinals of the Holy Kingdom, trembled as if he were standing in the dead of winter. But more than that, Alone noticed that Sergius kept casting furtive glances at Yusha, who stood beside him, wearing a serene smile. Is her faith really as strong as it seems? Somehow, he felt a bit uneasy. Chapter 89. Alone knew about Cardinal Sergius. In fact, not knowing Sergius was almost impossible. He was one of the main villains that appeared when you entered the Holy Kingdom while playing Psychedelia, and was also the first character to make the player aware of the kingdom's corruption. Alone was already aware of how strong his influence was within the Holy Kingdom of Rosario and how twisted his personality could be. In Psychedelia, he had once executed dozens of innocent believers on the grounds that they did not believe in God, simply because they defied his word. In short, Alone knew Sergius was a despicable person. Yes, so if you move here like this, yes, that's right. You can proceed this way. Once the chief cardinal arrives. Seeing Sergius explain the situation carefully, glancing nervously at Alone, felt quite awkward for many reasons. I thought he'd be troublesome to meet, so I tried to avoid it as much as possible. Surprised by this unexpected demeanor, Alone pondered the question that had been on his mind since earlier. What on earth happened to make him act like this? Alone, who was not foolish, realized that the reason Sergius was being so deferential was due to Yusha standing behind him. However, no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't understand why Sergius was being so overly cautious. The Sergius Alone knew from Psychedelia was a corrupted villain who, even in his last moments, never abandoned his pride. So, he subtly glanced at Yusha, who was smiling brightly in the distance, though only for a moment. Did you understand everything? In response to Cardinal Sergius's hesitant question, Alone nodded. Yes, I understood everything, thanks to you. Oh, that's a relief. By the way, you don't need to use formal language with me. Alone suggested. Although he was a noble of Asteria, Sergius held one of the highest positions under the Pope and the goddess, so there was no need for such formality. Despite this, Alone gently proposed, but... No, how could I? I am merely a servant of God, how could I dare to do that? Sergius's excessive refusals, to the point where he said no countless times, gave Alone an intense sense of incongruity. Is this really the same villain who showed disdain for humanity whenever I met him in the game? Alone awkwardly responded as he recalled Sergius's line from the game. I can never understand why I should show respect to lowly creatures who don't even believe in God. Is that so? Of course, absolutely. Watching Sergius's forced, awkward laugh, Alone cleared his throat and spoke. Anyway, thank you for going to such lengths to help. You really didn't have to come out and explain this personally, Cardinal. No, it's fine. As the manager, this is something I'm expected to handle. Alone knew that these minor explanations were usually not the manager's responsibility, but he nodded without asking further. I see. Yes. Sergius lowered his head. Watching him bow, Alone couldn't help but wonder where the corrupt cardinal of the Holy Kingdom had gone. A question arose in his mind as he watched Sergius act so deferentially. By the way, are you close with Cardinal Yusha? Alone asked, although he assumed they weren't close, just in case. However, of course, sir. Cardinal Sergius and I often discuss Sironia. Answered Yusha, not Sergius. Isn't that right, Cardinal Sergius? Yusha asked with a bright smile, as if seeking confirmation, and Sergius nodded frantically, frozen in place. Yes. Of course. Why are you nodding so vigorously? If you do that, it might seem like I'm making things up, and it could give the wrong impression. Ha. Am I being awkward? I just wanted to express how close I am with Cardinal Yusha. Perhaps I got a bit too enthusiastic. Sergius desperately tried to explain himself. Yes, just do it the way you normally would. You know, right? Yes, I understand. Just be comfortable. Relax. Yes. Yusha, satisfied with Sergius's sharp, almost military response, turned to Alone with a smile. See? I told you we're close. It was almost like witnessing a student claiming to be friends with someone they bullied right in front of the teacher. I see. Alone could only nod silently. He was once again reminded that Yusha was one of the 5 deadly sins. Right after meeting Sergius and getting a brief explanation about the ceremony. Alone, talking with Yusha, asked the question he hadn't managed to ask the day before. Abyssal entities. Yes, do you know anything about them? He was seeking information about the abyssal entities brought by Evan. Having heard that most of the abyssal entities on the market ended up in the Holy Kingdom, Alone thought Yusha might know something. I've heard about abyssal entities, but I don't know much beyond that. Yusha seemed to ponder something deeply before finally answering. Do you know anything about abyssal entities? Yes, it's due to the effects of the objects. Ah. Alone let out a quiet exclamation. Indeed, the abyssal items would certainly be of interest to the Holy Kingdom. This was because both abyssal entities and abyssal gems, though very weak, could bestow a divine status upon people. To the Holy Kingdom of Rosario, abyssal items were practically heretical artifacts, so it wasn't surprising that Yusha was aware of them. Well, as you mentioned, if someone in the Holy Kingdom is using abyssal entities, it could be a major issue, so I'll investigate it. I'd appreciate that. No, this is something that the Holy Kingdom absolutely needs to handle. Yusha, nodding, continued. Oh, and you should be able to enter the chamber of the Holy Spirit tomorrow, sir. Tomorrow? Yes. Alone was greatly surprised inwardly at Yusha's words. To be honest, I thought I'd have to wait over 2 weeks to get in. As far as he knew, it took a long time for priests below the rank of bishop to gain access to the chamber of the Holy Spirit. And for good reason. The chamber of the Holy Spirit was designated as a relic within the Holy Kingdom itself. So, Alone had been prepared to wait quietly for about 2 weeks, making this unexpected news all the more surprising. Though he didn't show it on his face. It's not too much trouble, is it? Not at all. Seeing Yusha smiling as she spoke, Alone felt a vague sense of unease. Remembering Sergius's behavior from earlier, he asked again. Yusha? Yes, sir. Just out of curiosity, you didn't use any questionable methods on my behalf, did you? Alone subtly phrased his question to avoid sounding too direct about violence, and Yusha smiled faintly. Of course not. Why would I go out of my way to do something like that? Is that so? Yes, I just used a bit of a persuasion. There's nothing for you to worry about. Alone responded with a silent nod. The next evening. Following Yusha, Alone made his way to the chamber of the Holy Spirit located deep within the Rosario Temple. Inside the temple. Cardinal Yusha. Hello, human. They met a young man. Though he wore the holy vestments, he still had a youthful appearance, not yet fully grown. However, despite his youth, none of the paladins or priests guarding the temple dared to look down on him. Standing before Yusha and Alone with a displeased expression was none other than the man known as the Saint in the Holy Kingdom of Rosario, chosen directly by the goddess Sironia. Human's gaze shifted to Count Palacio. Allowing a non-believer to enter the chamber of the Holy Spirit, this is excessive. His tone was openly hostile. Yet, Yusha maintained her smile. As I understand, the decision was already made. Wasn't it you who pushed for this outcome, Cardinal Yusha? I believe the Saint knows well that it was conducted transparently, through a vote. But the vote itself. Human, about to protest further, closed his mouth. On the surface, Yusha was correct. The proposal to allow Count Palacio access had been determined by a vote. With a small sigh and a frown, Human spoke. Behaving in such a manner is improper, Cardinal Yusha. Thank you for your concern. With that warning, Human glanced coldly at Count Palacio before walking past him. It seems he might dislike me now. Alone felt slightly uneasy about Human's obvious hostility but shrugged it off. In truth, he wasn't particularly intimidated by Human's animosity. Or rather, he didn't feel concerned, precisely because Human's character wasn't violent. Despite being a strict principled man rooted in faith, Human's nature was not malicious. Had he been the protagonist, he'd be the type to be mocked by players for his overly righteous attitude fitting of a saint. Thus, without much concern, Alone was able to reach the chamber of the Saint alongside Yusha. Good luck, sir. As he stepped further into the chamber of the Holy Spirit, he muttered, gazing around in awe. The room was as he remembered, entirely covered in pristine white marble. But what truly captured his admiration was the statue of the goddess Sironia at the far end of the room. The enormous statue, taking up more than half the space, was overwhelming in its grandeur. Normally, that statue would emit a radiant light, allowing communication with the goddess. But that was something only the original protagonist, Eliban, the saints, or bishops with deep faith could do. Ah, come to think of it, I believe even the bishops and cardinals couldn't make the statue shine. Alone recalled the setting that the stronger the statue's light, the clearer the connection with the goddess, but that wasn't something that particularly concerned him. Sigh. Alone gathered a small amount of magical energy, making a simple seal to obtain the item he sought. Perception. As he cast the spell, the moment the magic began to activate. Wuntilda. Who? A bright, white light started bursting forth from the statue of the goddess. Human, one of the only 2 saints in the Holy Kingdom of Rosario and a man widely beloved by the people within the Holy Kingdom, did not like Count Palacio. Or rather, to be precise, he had recently started to dislike him. It was because, despite not being a follower of Saronia, he had used his connections to gain access to the chamber of the Holy Spirit. And he did so through Cardinal Yusha, who had been manipulating the kingdom by sweet-talking the other cardinals to her will. However, despite knowing this, Human couldn't do anything, as the goddess Saronia herself had remained silent about Yusha. Why does the goddess continue to let her be? Human sighed briefly in frustration. But it was only for a moment. Human then moved to a nearby room. This was a small chamber next to the chamber of the Holy Spirit. A tiny confessional, large enough to fit only one person, permitted only for saints, where one could glimpse into the chamber of the Holy Spirit. He looked inside to keep an eye on Count Palacio, concerned he might steal something from the room filled with relics. What? He could only utter that in stunned silence as he looked at Count Palacio standing in the center of the chamber. And with good reason, the statue of the goddess Saronia was radiating a brilliant light. An even more magnificent light than when he, a saint, listened to the goddess's words. Chapter 90. In the underground of Rosario, the name of both the Holy Kingdom and its capital, stood a man in the heart of a vast subterranean cavern, a labyrinthine network of aqueducts converging here. His gentle smile clashed with the dim setting. The man, wearing a pendant engraved with the lunar symbol of Saronia and dressed in somber ceremonial robes, was none other than Rosario's chief cardinal, Anderd. You have arrived. A soft murmur echoed as another man, draped head to toe in a black robe, began to step forward from the cavern's shadows. Ah, as expected, I couldn't deceive the cardinal's eyes. The masked figure, eyes creased in a mischievous expression, drew closer to Anderd with a casual wave. Thud. A box landed before Anderd. Though neither small nor large, the box drew his attention. Please, inspect it, the masked man prompted. Kneeling to examine the box, Anderd lifted the lid and involuntarily gasped, "Oh." Inside lay countless abyssal cores, their number easily exceeding 50. Momentarily stunned, Anderd quickly closed the box and rose, bowing respectfully. Thank you, brother. Thanks to this, we can proceed as planned. That's good to hear. You mentioned the birthright, correct? Yes, provided the schedule remains unchanged. The masked man shrugged at Anderd's words, turning as though to leave, before pausing to ask, would it be all right if I ask you something? Please, speak freely. With his serene smile, Anderd encouraged him, and after a brief hesitation, the masked man spoke. I'm curious as to why the cardinal would involve himself in something like this. If it's too personal, feel free to decline. Anderd hesitated before answering, to seek salvation. Salvation, you say? The masked man repeated his words, prompting Anderd to elaborate. Brother, what do you think of the divine? To be honest, I haven't really given it much thought. I believe the divine is unfair. The statement was jarring, especially coming from the chief cardinal. Allow me to ask you a question. The masked man remained silent, listening intently as Anderd continued. There are those who offer prayers to the divine daily. Some go to temples to pray, some fight to uphold the divine's name, and others tread thorny paths to fulfill their divine mission. Others abandon an ailing elder to journey to the Holy Land or take lives unwillingly to uphold the divine's will. Some, who haven't eaten for days, pray for even moldy bread to stave off hunger, while others pray to heal the sick. Anderd's voice went on, recounting story after story of different people, their struggles pouring forth endlessly until, finally, he posed his last question to the masked man. All these people believe in Saronia and pray. Who, do you think, would receive divine aid? As the masked man pondered the question, Anderd, still smiling serenely, added, Don't trouble yourself, there is no correct answer among the options I've provided. What? The masked man looked confused by Anderd's sudden statement, but Anderd continued speaking. As I said, there is no correct answer. The divine, or rather, Sironia, does not extend a hand of salvation to anyone. She simply acts according to her own will. A bitter expression crossed Anderd's face. The gods are like that. Faith, no matter how long it endures, has no bearing. Even if someone believes in Sironia for decades, if they do not please her, they receive neither power nor blessing. But, conversely, if she favors someone, they may receive power even without belief. It's as though faith is meaningless to them, with divine power bestowed entirely on a whim. Gods are such beings, indifferent to genuine prayers, faith, sacrifice, and martyrdom, wielding power only for themselves. After a moment's silence, Anderd smiled again, an expression both gentle and devout. That's why I made this decision. In a profoundly compassionate and sacred tone, he said, that's why I intend to proceed. The masked man glanced toward the vast cavern behind Anderd. A place where no one is discriminated against, he said. Though dark, the torches lining the space revealed the sheer size of the cavern, as well as the presence of countless people behind the cardinal. Where anyone who believes can share in power equally. Men and women, elders and children, commoners, priests, inquisitors, and nuns were all gathered in reverent prayer, facing the same place. A sanctuary solely for believers. At the end of the space stood a massive statue, clearly crafted by human hands, a towering likeness of a human form. A god made by humanity. The masked man looked at Anderd, who still wore his endlessly warm smile. In the torchlight, that smile seemed all the more eerie, almost like that of a madman. Suddenly, the masked man felt a strange fear. Anderd's benevolent smile, cast in shadow by the torchlight, deepened ominously, resembling that of a lunatic. As soon as Alone used magic, he was surprised by an unexpected burst of light. Why is that glowing? The Sironia goddess statue shouldn't react to magic in the first place. He quickly ceased his spell casting. However, even after stopping, the light from the statue of Sironia continued to shine. Soon, a soft but startled voice rang in Alone's ear. What is this? The voice was feminine and nervous, but no physical form appeared, only the statue glowed. Realizing the voice belonged to the goddess Sironia, Alone felt compelled to show respect and began to kneel, only to be interrupted. Wait! At her urgent tone, Alone froze mid-kneel, his face showing a mixture of confusion as he gazed at the statue. Who are you? Hearing the goddess's voice tremble, Alone realized she was wary of him. Though he couldn't understand why, he knew he shouldn't keep the goddess waiting for a reply. I am Count Palatio of the Kingdom of Asteria, Great Goddess Sironia. Recalling a self-introduction from the game, he responded accordingly. No, that's not what ha! The goddess, seeming frustrated, suddenly sighed before lapsing into silence. After a moment, she spoke again, more composed but with a hint of urgency. Count Palatio. What is your purpose in coming here? Alone sensed the concealed urgency in her voice and, after a moment's hesitation, decided to be direct. I came hoping to obtain the Aita's pendant. This relic, hidden in the saint's chamber and lacking any traceable magic, was what Alone had sought. At his words. Clink tilde. The marble floor to the right of the statue lightly shifted open. Reach out your hand. Sironia's voice echoed, and when Alone extended his hand. Thud. A white pendant dropped into his palm. Is this the purpose for which you came here? Yes, it is, but why give it to me so suddenly? Although he sensed her intention, Alone still asked out of curiosity. Sironia responded simply. Take it. Are you sure about this? Yes. Now, if that's all, you may go. With those words, she vanished, and the white light dissipated instantly, as if a power outage had occurred. Though her tone had become calm toward the end, her voice had sounded hurried, almost as if she was escaping. Feeling bewildered, Alone thought, what exactly is going on here? The situation reminded him of his encounter with Heinkel at the Mage Association, and he recalled Heinkel's cryptic mention of behind. Alone glanced over his shoulder, but nothing was there. What is this? He wondered, feeling an odd sense of unease as he left the saint's chamber with the Aita's pendant he'd originally sought. Meanwhile, in Rosario, Saint Eumann stood wide-eyed and stunned by what he had just witnessed. There were several reasons for his astonishment. First, he was shocked that Count Palatio could communicate with the goddess Sironia. Second, he was surprised that Sironia's statue glowed even brighter in the Count's presence than it ever had with him. But what astonished him most, leaving his mouth agape, was that The goddess herself bestowed a relic upon him. Cyronia had personally given a sacred artifact to Count Palatio. Such an act was typically reserved for a divine ceremony through which the goddess would formally choose a saint. Though Count Palatio's request had initiated the interaction, Eumen, who was unaware of what had transpired in the saint's chamber, wondered, could Count Palatio have manipulated something, knowing I was watching? After all, the goddess Cyronia usually followed strict procedures for such holy ceremonies, not acting so abruptly. Once Count Palatio departed, Eumen entered the sanctuary of the Holy Spirit, knelt, and began praying. After a short while, voom! The Cyronia statue began to glow, and her voice echoed. "What troubles you, my child?" Her voice sounded slightly weary, though Eumen, having seen the goddess bestow the relic, didn't notice the subtle change. Preparing to speak, he said, "Great goddess Cyronia, I wish to report that Count Palatio has taken an item from the chamber." "Enough," Cyronia interrupted. "That was given by me, pay it no mind, my child." "Truly? Is that so?" "Yes. If you witnessed today's events, pretend you saw nothing." With that, Cyronia vanished. Kneeling in the sanctuary of the Holy Spirit, Eumen was left to ponder in shock. The goddess herself granted a relic to Count Palatio. After a long silence, he could only conclude, "Then, does that mean Count Palatio is like me, a saint?"